United States was not only the first country to manufacture nuclear weapons, but also the first to dare to use them, and open the gates of modern hell. In the blink of an eye, Hiroshima and Nagasaki were no longer cities, but became to flatlands where civilization evaporated and the past returned to the Stone Age. Today, the world has more than 10 countries possessing nuclear weapons, a weapon that not only has the nature of deterrence, demonstrating absolute power, but it is also the last shield of weak countries against the threat of destruction from hostile forces. But the road to get there is never easy. Behind nuclear programs lie sophisticated networks of espionage, betrayal of the nation, and sometimes bold moves in the dark. The story begins in 1938 when German scientists discovered the phenomenon of nuclear fission, the ability to split atoms, releasing enormous energy through chain reactions. In the context of the rise of Nazi Germany, many scientists were concerned that Nazi Germany could successfully develop the first nuclear bomb, and if this happened, Hitler would hold the fate of all of Europe in his hands. Albert Einstein, then a world-famous scientist and a Jew, left Germany to escape Nazism. He later wrote to US President Roosevelt, warning that if this technology were held by Germany, it would create a serious threat to the whole world. And from that letter contributed to the birth of the Manhattan Project, the top-secret nuclear weapons program of the United States in cooperation with the United Kingdom and Canada, so that the United States became the first country in the world to successfully manufacture a nuclear bomb. In May 1945, after the defeat of the Allies and the surrender of Nazi Germany at the Potsdam Conference, when President Harry S. Truman, Stalin and Churchill were discussing the future of Germany, Truman talked with Stalin about a new weapon, and would use it to end the war with Japan. Stalin knew very well what the American weapons were because the Soviet Union itself had planted spies inside the Manhattan Project, but he was still angry that he was one step behind the Americans. In August of that year, the US dropped the first 2 atomic bombs, Fat Man and Little Boy, on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, forcing Japan to surrender, ending World War II. But at that moment, the global nuclear arms race officially began. The Soviet Union could not ignore the power of nuclear weapons. It was the first country to enter this race. In fact, they started the program in 1941 when they saw the abnormality of German, British and American scientists no longer publishing scientific research related to nuclear separation. They suspected that Western countries were secretly developing weapons, and of course the Soviet Union could not stay out of it. Although they possessed many documents collected through intelligence activities from the Manhattan Project, the Soviet leaders still did not completely trust these documents absolutely because they were worried that the information provided had been distorted by double agents. Instead of relying on stolen designs, the Soviet Union chose to conduct independent research, while using captured German scientists to develop a separate parallel program to verify the accuracy of the American data. Then, earlier than the United States expected, in 1949, the Soviet Union successfully tested its first nuclear bomb, codenamed RS-1, a bomb similar to the American Fat Man, at the Kazakhstan test site after the Soviet Union broke the American monopoly. The third country to join this list was the United Kingdom. Many people may think that America will support its close ally, after fighting side by side in both world wars, but the reality is completely different. As early as 1940, the United Kingdom started its own nuclear project called Superpowers. It was a pioneer in nuclear research before the United States. However, because its resources were diverted for the war, England was forced to transfer all of its research to the United States and merge with the Manhattan Project. The agreement was signed to ensure that both sides would exchange for a common purpose and not use weapons to confront each other. But in 1945, after successfully testing and using the atomic bomb, the US unilaterally canceled the agreement. This encouraged England to continue its own nuclear program, and to do so quickly because they controlled most of the world's uranium at that time. In 1952, England officially succeeded with the first nuclear bomb, in a campaign called Operation Hurricane at the Montebello Islands located off the northwest coast of Australia. After the Soviet Union successfully tested the atomic bomb in 1949, the United States immediately turned to a more powerful weapon, the thermonuclear bomb. Unlike the atomic bomb that used fission, this type of bomb used the fusion reaction that took place in the core of stars, creating a more powerful destructive force. Some scientists, including Oppenheimer, warned that this step could push humanity into a dangerous era, but President Truman still approved the plan. In 1952, the United States successfully tested the first thermonuclear bomb, called Ivy Mike, which was 450 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Nagasaki. The Soviet Union quickly responded with the RF-37 in 1955 and England followed with the Grapple-1 in 1957. Faced with the threat of new weapons of mass destruction, the United States was forced to resume cooperation with England, leading to the re-signing of the nuclear agreement in 1958, establishing a mechanism for technology sharing and security coordination in the field of nuclear weapons. The fourth country to join nuclear weapons was France, which started its own nuclear program after World War II in cooperation with Israel but focused mainly on energy rather than weaponizing this technology. But after the Suez Canal crisis, and in the face of increasing tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union, France decided to pursue a nuclear deterrence strategy to assert its position as a European superpower. The US opposed France's development of its own nuclear weapons due to concerns about how they would use them, but under the leadership of President Charles de Gaulle, who declared that nuclear weapons were a prerequisite for France to have true sovereignty and strategic independence from NATO and the US. Uranium resources from former colonies such as Niger, Gabon and Madagascar were an important advantage. Despite the devastated economy after the war, French scientists continued to work tirelessly, and by 1960 they had successfully tested the first atomic bomb, named Gerbil, in the Sahara Desert of Algeria. China was the fifth country to want nuclear weapons in their military arsenal. Initially, Beijing received a lot of help from Moscow because they considered it an important ally. However, after Stalin's death, his successor, President Nikita Khrushchev, wanted to change his predecessor's foreign policy. At this time, the head of the Chinese Communist Party, Mao Zedong, condemned Khrushchev's policy toward the West, saying that it went against the spirit of communism. Political tensions escalated, and finally the Soviet Union withdrew all nuclear support for China. However, instead of slowing down, China has developed its own nuclear weapons program at a speed that surprised many countries, especially in the context of China's internal cultural revolution. However, resources were still prioritized for the nuclear field, and the discovery of large-scale natural uranium mines in the country contributed significantly. In 1964, China successfully tested its first atomic bomb, in a dry lake area in the Lopner region, with the code name Project 596, and only 32 months later, they continued to make a strong impression, when they successfully tested their first thermonuclear bomb. This was the shortest time it took for a country to go from atomic bombs to thermonuclear bombs, a huge leap, especially for a country that was still very young in military technology at the time. After China, the nuclear race began to take a different turn. Not every country has publicly declared its possession of nuclear weapons. Israel is a prime example. It is the only country in the world that has never officially admitted to possessing nuclear weapons. They have not denied it, have not announced the number, have not officially declared it, and no one knows exactly how many nuclear warheads Israel has or when it first acquired them. But the connections were revealed little by little. Since 1950, Israel has cooperated closely with France in the field of nuclear energy. France was the country that helped them build a secret research facility in the Negev desert. This became the focus of suspicion. By 1963, U.S. President John Fitzgerald Kennedy began to express concern that Israel was secretly developing nuclear weapons. He requested direct inspection of Israel's nuclear facilities to ensure that this place only serves civilian purposes. However, Israel repeatedly refused and delayed, only accepting a few carefully staged pre-arranged inspections during which they cleverly concealed underground areas that were later believed to be the actual sites for making nuclear bombs. Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion was said to have been very determined in his goal of possessing nuclear weapons, which led to a serious rift in relations with the United States, which at that time was not yet a close ally as it is today. Under President Lyndon Baines Johnson, the U.S. position gradually softened, and pressure on Israel to abandon its nuclear program gradually disappeared. The program, although not officially announced, was believed to have been completed in 1967. Throughout the 1960s, Israel's nuclear capabilities existed only in the form of speculation. After the Middle East, the world's eyes began to turn to South Asia, where India gradually became the seventh country to enter the nuclear game. Like many other countries, India pursued this technology for deterrence and defense reasons, especially against its two major rivals, China and Pakistan. Nuclear research in India began in the 1940s, but the development process lasted for decades. Things only really got going after the country lost the border war with China in the Himalayas in 1962. From there, the need for a more independent and deterrent national defense became clear. Initially, India focused on civilian nuclear energy receiving technology and fuel from countries like Canada and the United States. But at the same time they also secretly developed nuclear weapons using those same reactors. In 1974, India conducted its first nuclear weapon test in the Rajasthan desert, under the code name Smiling Buddha. The government declared this a peaceful nuclear explosion. However, the international community strongly condemned India for using the reactor supplied by Canada for energy purposes, and refused to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, which is the foundation for controlling the spread of this technology. However, India still actively refrained from converting all the technology into combat weapons. Most politicians at that time opposed the public deployment of nuclear warheads, so the nuclearization process was very slow, and it was not until 1990 that it was completed. While the major powers are still accelerating in the nuclear race, a completely different story is quietly taking place in southern Africa. South Africa became the next country to develop nuclear weapons, and is also one of the most special cases on this list. With the largest reserves of natural uranium in the world, South Africa is an important supplier to the United States, England, France and possibly the Soviet Union and Israel. Most of that uranium is used for power reactors, but it is also possible that some of it has been used for weapons. Since 1948, South Africa has developed a civilian nuclear program. But it was not until 1960-1970, in the context of the Soviet influence spreading throughout Namibia and Angola, along with being isolated in the international arena because of the apartheid policy, that South Africa began to turn to nuclear weapons as a form of last resort, when there were no more reliable allies. In 1977, they set up a testing facility in the Kalahari Desert, and almost detonated the first bomb, but a Soviet spy satellite discovered it, and informed the US. Under strong international pressure, South Africa was forced to cancel the testing plan. Two years later, in 1979, a mysterious event occurred when a US satellite detected a double flash of light in the South African-controlled Prince Edward Islands off the Indian Ocean. This event is known as the V incident, and is believed by many experts to be a joint nuclear test between Israel and South Africa. South Africa is believed to have allowed Israel to test weapons there in exchange for access to part of the nuclear research for its own program, which at that time did not yet have a complete warhead. By the mid-1980s, South Africa was believed to have successfully built 6 nuclear warheads of the same size and power as the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Many sources believe that this achievement was due to support from Israel in return for providing high-quality uranium similar to Israel. South Africa also maintained an ambiguous attitude, never publicly declaring its nuclear weapons as a form of discreet deterrence against hostile countries. The ninth country to possess nuclear weapons is Pakistan, after the defeat in the war with India in 1971 and the disagreement with Pakistan. Now Bangladesh, Pakistan is determined to pursue nuclear weapons at all costs. The then Prime Minister of Pakistan once declared that if India has a bomb, we will eat grass, eat leaves, even starve, but we must have a bomb of our own. After India's Pokhran test in 1974, Pakistan immediately joined in. Scientist Abdul Qadir Khan stole the secret of uranium enrichment from the Netherlands and brought it back to his country, which became the foundation for Pakistan's nuclear program. China also secretly supported Pakistan because it considered Pakistan a strategic counterweight to India. The US initially underestimated Pakistan's capabilities, but later turned a blind eye because it needed Islamabad in the war against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. Despite evidence that US military aid was diverted to nuclear weapons development in 1998 after India tested 5 nuclear warheads, including 1 thermonuclear warhead, Pakistan responded immediately with 5 explosions at the Rasko range, officially becoming the next nuclear power. Unlike India, Pakistan has a no first-use policy, claiming the right to first use even if it has not been attacked with nuclear weapons. This policy is controversial, but in reality has made India wary in many confrontations. An Indian spokesman once admitted that the nuclear threat from Pakistan made it impossible for us to seriously consider conventional attack options. In 2004, Abdul Qadir Khan confessed to illegally selling nuclear weapons technology to North Korea, Iran and Libya, raising global concerns about the risk of uncontrolled nuclear proliferation. The 10th country to possess nuclear weapons to date is North Korea. For Pyongyang, this is not only technology but also a vital weapon to maintain the regime and deter South Korea and the United States. Since the 1950s, North Korea has been supported by the Soviet Union with nuclear technology for energy. But in the 1970s, after refusing to help build nuclear weapons, they developed their own nuclear program based on domestic uranium resources to avoid dependence on foreign countries. Although they signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, North Korea still secretly built bombs, delayed inspections and finally withdrew from the NPT in 2002 when the United States accused it of illegally enriching uranium. In addition to initial support from the Soviet Union and China, Pakistan also played an important role in providing uranium enrichment technology. In 2005, North Korea declared its possession of nuclear weapons. In October 2006, they conducted their first small-scale test, followed by tests in 2009 and 2013. In 2016 and 2017, they claimed to have succeeded in developing a thermonuclear bomb. Although only 10 countries have officially developed nuclear weapons, the world is still not completely assured. Many countries have stored, shared, or manufactured nuclear weapons, especially during the Cold War. The US deployed warheads in more than 15 countries from Europe to Asia. Many of these places have withdrawn, but they are still maintained in Belgium, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Turkey. The Soviet Union also deployed nuclear weapons in all former republics, and by 2023 Russia had returned 130 warheads to Belarus. In addition, a series of countries such as Iran, Syria, Libya, Japan, Saudi Arabia, Argentina and Brazil all came close to possessing nuclear weapons, but due to international pressure they voluntarily gave up. However, nuclear ambitions have never completely disappeared. Some regions have reached nuclear non-proliferation agreements such as Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia and the South Pacific, but there is no guarantee that it will last forever. The development of nuclear weapons is an extremely expensive and easily traceable process, as evidenced by the fact that in 1979, a very small nuclear explosion in the middle of the Indian Ocean, covered by clouds, was still detected by US satellites. With the sophistication of modern technology, it is very difficult today for a nuclear program to exist in secret without the world knowing.